So let me go through this, and I know I am a kind of an odd man out in the business community here among the pulse and grains traders, but let me give you a snapshot of what is in store for the traders and then through them to the consumers for the future. Let me briefly mention about my institution, that is ICRISAT, which is the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, whose vision is a prosperous, food-secure, and resilient dryland tropics. All it says, dryland tropics means rain-fed areas which are present in the tropical areas. ICRISAT is an international institution, so we work in many countries around the world, but mostly in Asia and in Africa, but south of Sahara. So those are the places where we are located. Our target is 55 developing countries around the world. Okay, let me just give you a snapshot of what is the current scenario of pulses in India. Dr. Swapan Datta gave, and 2012-13 we had a reasonably good harvest, about 18.4 million tons. This year supposed to be 19.8 million tons. So a good progress that is happening. But look at the next slide. In terms of the major chickpea or chana producers, importers, and exporters, you will find India is the largest producer, also the largest importer. But look at the third column. After Australia, India is number 2 in exports. So you will ask me, but I need to ask you, because you are the importers and exporters, to explain why is India also an exporting country. That is because, most likely because we import the desi chickpea and export the high quality Kabuli chickpea to other countries. At least that is what I have worked. Of course, for your information, I am a chickpea breeder. I have spent 40 years of my life developing improved chickpea varieties. So I know chickpea in and out, so that's why I'm able to relate to this crop much more than any other crop. Many people talked about low yields in many developing countries, including India. As you will see there, the current average global yield is less than 1 ton per hectare. But on an average, in well-managed fields, even on the farmers' fields, you can get about 2.5 tons. But we are not getting it. So this is what we call the yield gap. But this yield, but look at the last column on the side. That is the potential yield. It says, whatever I do, I don't get a good price. So all these things play, but the silver lining is, if you do good job, you can harvest better yields. What are those things? I will also let you know one thing is that because of the Green Revolution, although it revolutionized and avoided starvation deaths in India, it also had a corollary effect in terms of the chickpea crop as such, moving away from the cooler North Indian climate to the warmer central and southern India. That is what this graph shows. So there has been a large shift of about 4 million hectares in the last 35 years. So it has had tremendous effect on the production and productivity, but research has been able to cope with this change. Other options of increasing production is to go for putting legumes after harvest of rice. Most of these legumes that we are talking about, we call them the winter legumes. Chickpea, lentil, peas. So these can be grown after harvest of rice, and because there is enough moisture in the soil, these can come up very easily. So in fact, in the whole of Indo-Gangetic Plain, there are about 11 million hectares that are left fallow. Even if half of that gets cultivated for chickpea, lentil, peas, you can imagine what change it will make to the supply of pulses in India. The other one is in terms of farmers adopting improved cultivars, high-yielding cultivars. And I have listed a few areas where we can empower the farmers by letting them the knowledge of what are those improved varieties, where they can get the seed, what they need to do, and a few of those things that we have done. Most importantly, whenever there is a high-yielding variety, people, the farmers will ask, okay, you say you have these improved varieties or high-yielding varieties, but I don't have the seed. So that is one thing that the governments need to do and the civil society needs to do, including the IPGA, where you need to work with the communities to ensure that the farmers get good quality improved seed at the right price, at the right time, so that they can give you the produce that you can market. Just giving an example that in chickpea, there are about 52 varieties that are currently being cultivated in the improved varieties. Out of these, about 50% are the joint varieties developed by ICAR and ICRISAT scientists. I mentioned about the seed, and this is where we need support from the associations like yours, where you can have agribusiness entrepreneurs who can make seed business as a venture and can provide the seed, improved seed, quality seed to the farming community so that they can improve the productivity of their land. Let me just give you an example of what research and science can do. Andhra Pradesh, 40 years ago when ICRISAT started, they said, why did anybody establish ICRISAT and ask them to work on chickpea? Because Andhra Pradesh is out of the chickpea growing area. I told you, chickpea is a cool season crop, what was grown mostly in northern part of India. But you saw the shift also. Because of Green Revolution, chickpea was moving from north to central and south India. So what we did was to develop short duration and heat tolerant chickpea varieties that are adapted to slightly warmer climates of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and northern Karnataka. And this is an example from the Andhra Pradesh state of India. This graph shows the change in area, production, and yield per hectare in Andhra Pradesh from 2000 to 2011. You will see that area has increased tremendously, production has increased almost 9 times, and you will also see that the average yield, which was less than 600 kilograms per hectare in the year 2000, is now almost double, 1,250 kilograms. So all because of the new science and research that was done by the scientists within India, especially in the Andhra Pradesh, the State Agriculture University and ICRISAT together. And as I said, this is just an example of what science can do to increase crop production and productivity. There are many other examples. Dr. Sapandatta gave some of that. So these are some of the short duration varieties of lentil and field pea, high yielding varieties in mung bean and urd bean, extra large seeded varieties of lentil, mung bean that can be traded very well. And again, Dr. Datta mentioned about short duration 60-day varieties of mung bean. These are some of those examples. Most importantly, let me just mention that for the first time in the world, we have been able to develop a hybrid in pulses. You had hybrid in vegetables, you had hybrid in maize, sorghum, in cotton, but in pulses, this is the first time that we have, and the advantage is that it has very high hybrid vigor, gets greater biomass, and can give 40 to 50% more yield than normal variety. So this is just to give you an example of what that hybrid has done in the on-farm trials between 2007 to 2010. As you can see here, it can give an average gain between 35 to 69% more yield than a variety. This year, by June-July crop season, we expect about 1.4 lakh hectares in Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka to be grown with the hybrids, pigeon pea. We have also been successful in developing early and extra early varieties so that they can fit into the available crop season, but especially the soil moisture that is available. So we have a range of varieties that can mature between, in case of chickpea, between 85 days to 110 days to match with what is available in the crop season. What is in store for the future? People talk about increasing temperature, warming. So what we have done is to screen the available germplasm, and we now have identified lines that have tolerance to heat. Normally, chickpea being a cool season crop, it cannot pod. That means the flowers will abort if the temperature goes beyond 32 degrees. But this one that you see on the slide was able to pod when the temperatures were more than 36 degrees. So we do this screening in summer. That's why we were able to make that comparison. The one on the left is a normal variety where it is not able to pod, but the other lines are able to pod. So this is something that we are developing for the future. As you are all aware, because of many policies from the government, labor is not available. Even if it is available, it is expensive. Farmers are not able to afford labor to harvest, so they are looking for mechanization. And what we are trying to do is, because chickpea is a short crop, the harvesters cannot lift the crop. There will be some damage. So we are developing varieties that are taller, they pod at a higher level, so that when you cut, you don't lose the crop. So this is one of the things that we are doing now. Possibly in the next 2 years, we should be able to have varieties that are suitable for mechanical harvest. Next thing, again, the question of labor. Weeding, because the crop has to be weeded. If you don't weed at least once, sometimes twice, yield will reduce by 50%. So what can we do? We are looking at how can we develop varieties that can tolerate weedicides. That means you spray the weedicide, your crop will survive, but the weeds will die off. So we have to develop those varieties which can tolerate some of the herbicides that are available, and we are successful in identifying those. So we are now incorporating that into high-yielding varieties. So maybe in another 2 to 4 years, we should have those varieties that are tolerant to herbicides. Market preference, all of you are aware, we are trying to breed Kabuli chickpeas which are bold seeded, large seeded, because it commands a higher price, and also we are looking at better seed color, mostly beige color, that is what is more acceptable. So that is one of the major objectives, and we are looking towards doing that. I'm giving you, as I said, more examples of chickpea because I have worked on it for few years. Dr. Datta mentioned about using transgenics for resistance to pod borer. As you can see here, there is a non-transgenic which has been damaged. This is a study in the lab. But because currently there is a moratorium by the Supreme Court on field testing, we are not able to do the test in the field. We can do it in the lab. We can do it in contained greenhouses. So as he says, we have the events, and if and when the government approves field testing, we should be able to get the transgenics onto the fields very quickly. That is one of the things that is available for the future. Dr. Datta also mentioned that the chickpea as well as the pigeon pea genome has been decoded, which means we know where the genes are, which gene controls what, so that if we have to develop a new variety, we know exactly where to target and then make the crosses, and would be able to develop a variety much quicker than just doing breeding in the dark. So this is chickpea genome and then the pigeon pea genome, and in both cases, ICRISAT was leading the consortium of many other people. You will see in the list of authors, there are between 25 to 40 authors because it involved many countries, including Australia, Canada, and many others. So it is a joint effort. We are also using, as I mentioned about the genome sequencing, and we are using that science, we call it genomics, where we are trying to develop the new varieties using some of these techniques. This is a case where we are looking at the root density or root length for increasing the drought tolerance in chickpea, and we have been successful in developing drought tolerance in chickpea. They are currently under multi-location tests. Maybe in another 2 years, they should be available to the farming community. Future scenario, demand will continue to grow. For the whole world, we need about 62 million tons by 2050. Supply gap will definitely exist in South Asia because population is very high. But technologies are available to bridge that yield gap. New initiatives and cutting-edge technologies are being deployed and will be deployed to solve the problems. And the good news is we are making good progress in technologies that can help increasing the supplies in the future. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for this warm applause for Dr. Gowda, sir. You brought in the last 15, 20 minutes, I think, a wonderful snapshot of what one can expect. The trade and industry constantly looks for signals about what's going to happen to this sector, what's going to happen to production, consumption, demand, supply, trade. And I think the kind of promise that new technologies are going to provide to pulses production, particularly in India, sends out a significant signal to the world at large simply because we are the world's largest producers, consumers, and importers. And as you rightly said, yes, our consumption is still relatively low. The per capita availability is low. With rising purchasing power and expanding population, we need to be consuming more pulses, and possibly the mismatch between production and consumption will stay. Possibly India will continue to remain a net importer. But if government policies become progressive, most unfortunately there has been a moratorium, and hopefully with the change in the political climate after the elections, hopefully the new government will see, I believe, some sense in adopting new technologies. I think that can certainly accelerate the pace of technology adoption and the pace of increase in production of pulses. I think that's something very, very positive. Let me open up this, this floor for a brief question-answer session. Dr. Gowda, as you know, is a busy person. Not easy to get him here, but he is here. We are absolutely fortunate. Any questions? I'm sure he'll be happy to answer. Sure.
Just let me add a few things which I couldn't cover. As I said, ICRISAT doesn't work only for India. We work for 55 countries. And some of the things that you heard in terms of imports from Myanmar. Myanmar had banned chickpea exports until maybe the year 98 or around that. Because of the varieties that I mentioned were cultivated, the production was so heavy, the government had to deregulate the export. So they were able to export because of the improved production in Myanmar. Because earlier it was in the rations for the military. So anything that is produced in Myanmar was going to the military. But because the production was so much, they had to open up. So same thing with Tanzania, pigeon pea. We are getting pigeon pea, but these are the pigeon pea varieties which ICRISAT developed along with the national programs. Same thing with Ethiopia. Chickpea varieties that are cultivated in Ethiopia or the joint varieties developed between Ethiopian National Program and ICRISAT. I just thought I will mention that.
Thank you, sir. A question? Yeah, sir.
Hi, it's Gordon Bacon from Pulse Canada. Doctor, I was interested in your comments about Supreme Court ruling that prevents field testing. My question is consumer acceptance of genetically modified crops in India, and what will be needed for the government of India to change its policy to allow field testing and introduction of genetically modified pulses in India?
I think consumer acceptance is important, but looking at the way BT cotton has taken up, if the farmer knows that the farmer can get better yield without much spray, so the profits will be more, the farmer will go ahead and grow the crop. But in terms of consumer acceptance, I think it is just a question of getting the proper message out to the consumers that the genetically modified crops are being consumed by people in many other countries, and it has been proven to be safe. So it is many times, I would say, that all of us need to be in that game of getting that message across to the consumers that genetically modified crops are not monsters. They are as good as the normal crop, except for that particular trait that is there, which is not going to make them monsters or otherwise. I think it is just a question of perception, but lot of education is needed in terms of getting the consumers accept the product. What I don't understand is the same people who take medicines, whether it is insulin or many other medicines, which are also produced by genetically modified organisms. No qualms about it, but when it comes to something else, then people are worried. So I think it's just a question of education.
Gordon, thanks. Let me also add something more. Cotton, genetically modified cotton, is one of the greatest success stories India has seen in the last 10 years. Probably the world has seen in the last decade. 90% of our production of cotton is BT cotton. That's number one. That cotton is, obviously cotton is an industrial crop, but the cotton seed contains oil and protein and a meal. Cotton seed oil is consumed in India. Cotton seed meal is consumed as animal feed. And there has been no consumer resistance at all. If anything, demand for cottonseed oil is only improving by leaps and bounds. And this is one. And there is a definite case and justification for extending this to other food crops. And in my opinion, if there was any crop which was a right candidate for commercialization, I think it is either BT chickpea or BT PGNP. Results of which, the initial results have been absolutely encouraging, because I work with some of the companies which are engaged in trial, container trial. I think once the government unfortunately has had did not favor this technology for whatever reason, but hopefully in the next 6 months and hopefully with a new government in place, things could change. That's my perception. And from a consumer perspective, I don't see any resistance at all. India is still a price-conscious market. India's per capita consumption is very low. Indians would be willing to eat anything that is certified as safe. Obviously, genetically modified foods are not unsafe foods. And so long as the foods are safe, I don't see a problem in consumer acceptance. I think they'll embrace it very happily. I have no doubt at all.
So far as GM crops are concerned, in case of cotton, it's not consumable, it's okay. But so far as consumption commodities are concerned, it's more than consumer acceptance. Legal matters or legal barriers are involved. For example, biosafety measures. So these things will have to be complied, then only the things will be accepted. And still the things are going on in this area of acceptance in terms of biosafety, clinical tests, etc. Until and unless these are proved beyond doubt that these are not going to be harmful for the human beings, I think GM crops cannot be considered for edible crops like PGNP. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Well, I would completely agree with you. Biosafety is very important, and you should introduce a GM crop only after all necessary biosafety precautions are taken, all the studies are done, because only then the government will approve the release of the crop. So no arguments on that. There are many countries that are already consuming for more than 1.5 decades now. So, and there are no recorded studies which are scientifically correct. There have been some studies where people had difficulties in accepting the method that was done, but any other study has not shown any effect of people who have consumed genetically modified crops.